Hello, everyone. Welcome to Here in Schenectady. I'm your host, Mike Diana, Director of Education at the Schenectady County Historical Society. Behind the camera is my colleague, Mary. Hey, Mary, how you doing?
Hey, guys.
All right, so we are here. Again, this is our new video series that we're really excited for, and I was particularly excited for this first installment because it takes us to this lovely and very fascinating place. This is, if you've never been here before, this is Wolf Hollow. No, not the brewery. We might be there later tonight, but today we are here in this very historic and beautiful part of our local landscape. So why is this place so remarkable? What makes it so important from a historical standpoint? Well, would you believe, and I'll tell you this, you heard it from me here first, folks, this small little ravine would play host to one of the most dramatic and important armed conflicts in the history of our area. This conflict would dictate the course of events for decades, or perhaps even a century of time here in the early colonial past. Now, what am I talking about? Well, allow me to back up. Allow me to back up to the start of the 17th century as Europeans are first starting to make their way up here into the northeastern part of what would become the United States. Well, you know, as these Europeans are just showing up, of course, we have various different Native American groups, different nations, different tribes, different confederacies of nations that are kind of carving up this landscape and coexisting in one way, shape, or form. Now, two groups that are going to be very important for our story here today. Of course, famously to the west of here, we have the Haudenosaunee, the Iroquois Confederacy, the Five Nations. They go by many names, but they were certainly a very important and very powerful group here in our area. But also to our east, we have another group, a different cultural group altogether, known broadly speaking as the Algonquin peoples, and there'd be various different subgroups of that broader category. Maybe you've heard of the Mohicans, right? Or various other groups out in Massachusetts. So there's a lot of different peoples out here to kind of sort through, and we can't get to all of that today, but suffice it to say, for a long period of time, there were conflicts between the Haudenosaunee and their Algonquin neighbors to the east. And it's kind of hard to get at to the specifics of all this so many years after the fact, but suffice it to say that as Europeans are coming up and making contact with these different groups, these groups are enlisting European support and aid in their local conflicts, their regional rivalries, and, well, you would see as early as 1609, for instance, Samuel de Champlain assisted Algonquin peoples in attacking the Iroquoian peoples, and you kind of have this cycle of conflict that would spill out of, well, maybe not out of control entirely, but it really did permeate the first half of the 17th century. In fact, these hostilities would really come to a head right here in 1669. Now, what's happening in 1669? Well, our town of Schenectady had just gotten its start, right? Built in 1661 by the Dutch. The English take over in 1664. And this is just 8 years after the first foundations of Schenectady would be built. Now, what you have in that year 69, you have a confederacy of Algonquin peoples, not just one homogenous group. This was actually, you might think of it sort of as a multinational effort to curb the rising power of the Haudenosaunee, in particular, the keepers of their eastern door, right? The Mohawk people whose territory we're pretty well and firmly in right about now. So you would have this large kind of conglomeration of warriors from many different peoples, probably many different dialects and languages spoken amongst these. I've heard, you know, I don't have exact numbers, but I've heard about 700 people in this multinational confederacy that was marching. They marched from east of the Hudson River, marched across that river right through the initial stages of the Mohawk Valley. In fact, they walked right past the tiny nascent town of Schenectady. The settlers of Schenectady were none the wiser as this large, powerful army made its way through the Mohawk Valley. And they marched and marched and marched until they got to the first principal town of the Mohawk people, which was situated where modern-day Fonda, New York is. It was a large, powerful, fortified town, home to probably more than 1,000 Mohawk people. It was a very important town. And this this Algonquin Confederacy lay siege to that town. Now, the Mohawks rallied their warriors. They were able to drive off the attackers, drive off these invaders, and kind of sent them away in disarray from that town. They were able to break the siege and chase those Algonquin warriors away. Now, the Mohawks, they wanted to make sure that they you know, they sent the message they wanted to send. They wanted to make sure that the Algonquins would never try to invade again. So they sent a contingent of their warriors kind of sneakily, stealthily ahead to get around the Algonquins as they made their kind of undignified retreat back to where they had come from. And those Mohawk warriors made their way down into this hollow, and they laid an ambush here, such that as the Algonquins, they'd be walking along the so if they'd be walking along the Mohawk River, right, which is down there, trying to get back to their home as quickly as they could, but the Mohawks had already taken up positions here. And when those Algonquin warriors passed, they sprang the ambush. And it was a pretty decisive military defeat for the Algonquins, right? They'd already been chased away from their siege, and then before they could get home to safety, they were set upon and pretty seriously, you know, kind of destroyed in this attack. The ones who were able to make it back to Algonquin territory safe and sound probably sent the message around that the Mohawks were not to be trifled with. This was not something that they would want to pursue by military means anymore. And that's actually, it's a pretty well-established story in kind of the traditional narratives of this area. You kind of hear a lot of talk about the battle and the bloodshed. But I want to impress upon you folks, it's not just about the warriors and the tomahawks and all that. No, the aftermath of this battle, of course, led to peace talks. And what I think the Mohawks and the Haudenosaunee don't get enough credit for is not just, you know, obviously the skill of their warriors, but also the astuteness of their politicians, the tact of their diplomats. So after this battle, talks began. Talks began which would basically put an end, or at least kind of tamper down some of this intermittent violence which had existed between the Mohawks and their Algonquin neighbors. In fact, we had a talk about this about 2 years ago. A gentleman, Evan Hefeli, I'm probably mispronouncing his name, but he argued in that talk that after the casualties of this battle at Wolf Hollow, the Mohawks were able to kind of convince one of the principal Algonquin peoples, the Mohicans. They were able to bring the Mohicans into the fold of Iroquoian control, you might say. Again, they didn't annex the Mohicans outright, but they were able to convince the Mohicans that rather than fight, it would be better to work together. And in fact, the Iroquois were able to use the Mohicans as intermediaries to the rest of the Algonquin peoples to be able to keep peace amongst what used to be a pretty fractious group, of what used to be a pretty contentious area. So again, you wouldn't really think that this small little ravine would have such geopolitical significance, but indeed it does, and that dates all the way back to 1669. Since then, of course, I don't know of any particularly big battles that have happened here, but in more recent history, this area was known for that history, for that battle that took place here. And it became something of a local tourist hotspot, you might say. In fact, even folks, within living memory, remember coming here as kids, or just kind of having picnics here, or just kind of enjoying this area. Because as you can tell, this is a beautiful place. It's kind of a chilly day today, but I bet you when the weather is warm, this would be a great place to come and take a nice little stroll. There's all kinds of cool things that you can see here. There's also rumors of, well, kind of caves here in the cliffside, which I don't know if I'd recommend you would explore those, but there's even a pretty interesting story about in 1857, there was a gentleman who was trying to mine for coal here. A gentleman by the last name of Underhill, which is kind of a fitting name for what he was doing. He was mining under this hill, trying to find some coal. He was pretty sure that there would be some, and he was so sure because local pranksters, as he was digging this hole out, he would go home for the night. Every night they would come and sprinkle some coal in that hole that he was digging. So he would think that he was just about to hit that vein of coal, and every time that he kept on digging, he would find, well, nothing, because again, all the promise was a false promise by these local pranksters. So again, this area has quite an interesting history. It's hard to access it today. You can see the road is no longer maintained. I do believe that has been ever since Hurricane Irene came through here and did a lot of damage to the infrastructure of this hollow. And I don't think the powers that be see it really as worthwhile to maintain this road. So it's kind of hard to get here, which is why I'm glad that you were able to come here with us today, virtually, to see this really incredible spot. So that's about all we have for this look into Schenectady's history, but this is, again, just the first of what we expect to be a long-running video series. So if you like what we're doing here, if you want to see more stuff like this, feel free to let us know. Let us know in the comments. Share this video with your friends and with your family, because the more engagement that we get on these videos, the more inspired we are to keep on doing these things. We like doing them, and as long as you like doing them, we can justify taking the time out of our daily work schedule to come and do more of these. So again, my name's been Mike Diana. Behind the camera is Mary Zawacki. We've been your film crew today, and we thank you so much for tuning in.